Imagine a city where the air no longer tastes like fear. In the neighborhoods of El Salvador, there was a time not long ago when crossing the wrong street was a death sentence. For decades, this nation was the murder capital of the world, a place where two warring shadows, MS-13 and Barrio 18, held the keys to every home and the life of every citizen. But today, the streets are unnervingly quiet. Children play in parks that were once killing fields. The extortionists are gone, but peace, as history often teaches us, is rarely free. To buy this tranquility, the government didn't just pass laws, they built a monument to finality, deep in the isolated valley of Tikaluca. Rising out of the earth, like a concrete monolith, sits at the center for the confinement of terrorism. It is the largest, strictest, and perhaps most controversial prison on the planet. Within these walls, 40,000 men have been erased from the world. They are the worst of the worst. Individuals whose collective history is written in the blood of thousands. Here, the concept of rehabilitation has been replaced by the reality of containment. Those who enter this fortress are told one thing with absolute certainty: you will never leave this place alive. This is not just a prison. It is a black hole where the sun never sets, and the clock has stopped forever. To understand the sheer scale of CECOT, you have to understand the journey there. You don't just drive up to the front gates. The approach is a psychological descent into a realm where the state's power is absolute. As you move toward the facility, the air seems to grow heavy. The first thing you notice isn't the walls, but the silence. Not a natural silence, but a technological one. Within a 2-kilometer radius of the prison, the digital world simply ceases to exist. Hyperword signal jammers create a dead zone so profound that your phone becomes nothing more than a useless slab of glass and metal. The government isn't just locking these men away. They are severing their connection to the human tapestry. Then come the walls. There are layers to this onion of concrete and steel. First, a 9-meter-high perimeter wall, topped with a 3-meter-high electric fence pulsing with 15,000 volts of lethal current. 19 watchtowers loom over the landscape, manned by snipers who are instructed to view anything that moves as a potential threat. The security protocol for visitors is a masterclass in modern paranoia. It's not enough to empty your pockets. You are subjected to high-capacity X-ray scanners. Machines so powerful they don't just see what's in your pockets. They see your bones, your internal organs, and any foreign object a person might try to hide within their own body. In the past, gang members were notorious for swallowing micro SD cards, or even small phone charges, to maintain their criminal empires from behind bars. At CECOT, that era is over. The guards you encounter are perhaps the most unsettling part of the atmosphere. Almost all of them wear black tactical masks. They aren't hiding from the heat. They are hiding from the reach of the very men they guard. Even in a high-secured fortress, the fear of the gang's outside influence is so pervasive that a guard's identity is a state secret. If a gang member knows your face, they know your family. If they know your family, they have leverage. By wearing the mask, the guards become anonymous extensions of the state, faceless sentinels in a world of ghosts. As you pass through the final checkpoint, the pebble alarm crunches beneath your feet. The entire perimeter between the walls is covered in loose, white stones. It's a low-tech, but brilliant solution. It is physically impossible to move silently across these rocks. Every footstep is a loud, rhythmic announcement of your presence. It's a place where even the ground is designed to betray you. To grasp why a nation of 6 million people felt the need to build a cage for 40,000, we have to look back at the scar tissue of El Salvador's history. For 30 years, this country didn't belong to its people. It belonged to the Maras. The two primary factions, MS-13 and Barrio 18, weren't just gangs. They were a parallel state. They had their own taxes, their own borders, and their own judicial system, which almost always involved a brutal execution. At the height of the chaos, the statistics were staggering. In 2015, the country saw 104 homicides for every 100,000 inhabitants. To put that in perspective, that is a rate higher than many active war zones. Normalcy bias is a powerful thing. For decades, Salvadorans lived in a state of functional terror. You didn't call the police if your business was being You paid the rent. You didn't report a crime. You looked the other way. The gangs controlled the buses, the markets, and the very breath of the youth. Their reach was so absolute that they could shut down the entire capital city. With a single ponecol, the gangs used tattoos as their heraldry. A teardrop under the eye wasn't just ink, it was a resume. It told the world that the wearer had taken a life. The letters, Mizor, the number 18 across a man's forehead, or a declaration of war against society. These men didn't just commit crimes, they performed them, using unspeakable acts of violence to maintain a culture of the blade that kept the population periled. For years, previous governments tried to negotiate. They held truces behind closed doors, offering gang leaders better prison conditions in exchange for a temporary drop in the murder rate. But these were band-aids on a severed artery. Each truce only gave the gangs more time to organize, more power to recruit, and more leverage over the state. The breaking point arrived in March 2022, in a single weekend of sheer, unadulterated madness. The gangs launched a coordinated wave of violence that left 62 people dead in less than 48 hours. These weren't rival gang members. They were bakers, street vendors, and commuters. It was a blatant display of power, a message to the new administration of President Nayib Bukele. We are the ones who rule. But the gangs miscalculated. They expected another negotiation. Instead, they got the iron fist. The government declared a state of emergency, suspending constitutional rights, and launching a massive, nationwide dragnet. In the month that followed, more than 70,000 people were arrested. That is roughly 2% of the entire adult population of the country. The images were beamed around the world. Thousands of shirtless, tattooed men, forced to sit in tight rows, heads bowed, hands bound. This was the birth of the mega prison. CECOT was constructed in a record-breaking 7 months. It wasn't built to be a correctional facility. It was built to be a tomb for a subculture. The government's message was clear. The time for talking was over. The state had decided that for the nation to live, the gangs had to die to the world. As the first buses arrived at CECOT, in the dead of night, the thousands of men inside the men who had once commanded the streets, with the wave of a handwear, met with a reality they never envisioned. They were no longer commanders or soldiers. They were now just numbers in a vast, concrete machine designed to ensure they would never see the sun again without a bar in front of it. But within this massive operation, a darker question began to emerge. In a net cast so wide that it caught 70,000 people in 16 months, how many of those caught were truly the monsters they were labeled to be? And in the rush to secure the future, what happened to the souls, who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? The investigation into the atmosphere of CECOT reveals a place where the line between justice and vengeance has become dangerously thin. The Iron Fists of March 2022 didn't just change the law. It changed the very chemistry of Salvadoran society. Under the state of emergency, the legal threshold for arrest evaporated. If you had the wrong tattoo, you were taken. If a neighbor whispered your name to a soldier, you were taken. If you lived in a neighborhood controlled by MS-13 and wear a chain, talking to the wrong person, you were taken. This created a profound contradiction. A nation that felt safer than it had in 30 years, but a population that lived with the knowledge that anyone could disappear into the system without a trial. Human rights organizations began to sound the alarm, citing stories of young men with no criminal rigors, bakers, students, and factory workers who were swept up in the mass arrests. Because of the no-contact policy, their families were plunged into a living nightmare. Mothers spent months outside prison gates, clutching birth certificates and clean police records, begging for a scrap of information. In the government's eyes, these were collateral damage in a holy war against the Miraz. The official stance was chillingly simple. If you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. But in a system where 2,500 people are packed into a single module, innocence is a difficult thing to prove from the inside of a cage. Inside the walls of CECOT, the contradiction becomes even more visceral. You see men who have committed heinous actsmen, who have ended dozens of lives, sitting shoulder to shoulder with those who may have just been in the wrong place. There is no distinction made. They all wear the same white uniform. They all have their heads shaved to the scalp every 2 weeks. They all lose their names. The state has decided that the risk of letting one predator go is greater than the tragedy of holding 10 innocent men. It is a brutal utilitarian math that defines the new El Salvador. Entering the heart of the prison of modules is like stepping into a different dimension of human existence. As the massive steel doors groan open, you are hit by a wall of heat and the collective hum of thousands of voices. There are 8 modules in total, each a self-contained fortress. Each module contains 32 massive cells, and each cell is a world unto itself. When you stand before the bars, you are confronted by a sea of white. Each cell is designed for 80 men, but the reality is often closer to 150. There is no furniture. There are no chairs. There are only 4-level metal bunks, stacked like warehouse shelving, reaching toward the ceiling. The prisoners spend nearly 24 hours a day on these cold metal slats. There are no mattresses, no pillows, just the bare steel and a single white sheet. The psychological weight of the visual is staggering. Thousands of eyes fixate on you. These are men who once ruled neighborhoods through terror, now reduced to a state of total robotic obedience. They move only when told. They eat only when told. They speak only when permitted. The government has stripped away every vestige of their former identity. The elaborate gang hierarchies that once dictated life and death on the streets have been flattened. In CECOT, a general of MS-13 sleeps on the same metal rack as a low-level lookout. This is the point of no return. The authorities are open about the fact that there is no out. There are no workshops to learn a trade. There are no classrooms. There is only the passage of time. The prisoners are allowed exactly 1 hour of exercise per week, not in a courtyard under the sun, but in a small, enclosed area within the module, still under the watchful eyes of guards with 12-gauge shotguns. Fortioter, 167 hours of the week. They are confined to the cell. They will never see the horizon again. They will never see a tree, a car, or the faces of their children. They have been removed from the timeline of the human race. To walk through a day in CECOT is to witness a walk through hell that is meticulously organized and sanitized. The sensory details are overwhelming. The air is thick with the smell of industrial cleaner and the sweat of 100 men packed into a space the size of a small retail store. The light is perhaps the most subtle form of pressure. In CECOT, the lights never go out. There is no night. High-intensity fluorescent bulbs glare 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, ensuring that the guards on the elevated catwalks can see every movement. To sleep, the inmates are forced to wrap their towels around their eyes, trying to find a sliver of darkness in a world of permanent noon. Hygiene is a communal struggle. Each cell has only 2 toilets and 2 open shower areas for over 100 men. There is no privacy. There is no dignity. They wash themselves using plastic dippers from a shared basin. Drinking water comes from a single large blue barrel in the corner. If the barrel is empty, they wait. The diet is designed for survival, not comfort. Every day is a repeating loop of beans and rice for breakfast, followed by white rice, pasta, and 2 tortillas. For lunch and dinner, there is no meat. There is no fruit. The prisoners must eat with their hands. Utensils are considered potential weapons. They eat in silence, staring at the concrete walls, consuming the same bland calories they had yesterday and will have tomorrow. But the true hell is found in the isolation cells. For those who break the strict rules of the module, there is the darkness. These cells are smaller, with solid steel doors that have only a tiny slit for food. Inside, there is nothing but a concrete slab. No light enters here. A man can be left in this void for 15 days at a time, alone with the ghosts of his past and the silence of his future. The guards say this is where even the most hardened criminals break. Without a book, without a voice, without the sun. The mind begins to eat itself. As the day ends, the prisoners climb back onto their metal bunks. They stack themselves for levels high, a human warehouse of wasted potential. They lay there in the permanent glare of the lights, listening to the distant hum of the signal jammers. One of these men is Marvin Ernesto Matano Vasquez, known as Psycho. He has been a member of MS-13 since he was a child. He has spent 25 years in the shadows of the gang world. As he sits on his bunk, his body covered in the ink of 1,000 crimes, he looks toward the bars. He has a story to tell, a story that involves more than 50 lives taken. But as the heavy steel door of the module begins to slide shut for the evening, the sound of the locking mechanism echoes through the hall like a gavel. The world outside is moving on. Inside, the silence is about to be broken by a confession. The heavy silence of the module is broken by the rhythmic clanging of keys. A team of 12 guards, their faces obscured by black masks, approaches. They are not there for a riot. They are there for a single man. The prisoner is Marvin Ernesto Matano Vasquez, a man whose street name, Psycho, was earned through decades of uncompromising brutality. When the mask is removed and the interview begins, the atmosphere shifts. Marvin is 41 years old, though his eyes carry the weight of several lifetimes. He joined the Miraz at the age of 11, seeking a father figure in the slums. He speaks with a chilling, detached clarity about the life he chose. When asked how many lives he has ended, he doesn't flinch. He simply admits that after 50, he stopped counting. "This is how the devil pays," Marvin says, his voice a low rasp. He describes a world where the first test of loyalty was often to end a relative. He speaks of gaining territory as if he were a general in a legitimate war. The most profound reveal, however, isn't the body count, it's the forever. Marvin hasn't seen his son since the boy was 5 years old. Under the rules of CECOT, they will never speak again. There are no letters, no phone calls, and no glass-partitioned visits. Marvin realizes that he has effectively ended his own life. He sits in a cell with members of Barrio 80 men. He would have ended on the street. The war is over, and everyone lost. As the interview concludes, the guards lead him back to the sea of white uniforms. The truth of CECOT is finally laid bare. Some souls are beyond the reach of grace. The discovery for any visitor is the sheer emptiness in the eyes of the inmates. They are the walking dead, living out a biological existence in a concrete tomb. The legacy of CECOT is a ledger of impossible math. On one side, the numbers are triumphant. El Salvador has gone from the most dangerous country to one of the safest. The murder rate has plummeted to 2.4 per 100,000. A generation of children is growing up without knowing a gang commander. For the average Salvadoran, the mega prison is the price of their freedom. It is the wall that keeps the monsters at bay. But on the other side of the ledger, there is a lingering shadow. The butterfly effect of this mass incarceration is yet to be fully understood. There are thousands of families with an empty chair at the table. The world watches El Salvador with a mixture of awe and horror. Is this a blueprint for restoring order, or a cautionary tale of lost rights? The government's message remains unwavering. Justice must be served for the victims. As you exit the final gate, you hear the crunch of the white pebbles one last time. In Tisbale, the state has built a machine that never sleeps. The sun sets over volcanic peaks, bathing the country in golden light. But a few miles away, inside CECOT, the fluorescent lights stay on. The monsters are in their cages, and the streets are quiet. The nation holds its breath, hoping that this silence is the sound of peace.